One day the race of life will end. No more trials and no more opportunities to serve the Lord on this earth. One day the last lap will be run and the goal line will be crossed. The Bible gives us some signs that point to the time when that last lap might start and why we must be faithful to the end. Stay with us. From Chicago's Moody Church, this is Running to Win with Dr. Erwin Lutzer, whose clear teaching helps us make it across the finish line. We're in a series called What Is God Up To? And we're switching from past tense to future tense, looking at what's ahead for those who believe in Christ and for those who don't. Here is Dr. Lutzer with part one of The Final Battle.
A number of years ago, I read a story of a young boy who was reading a novel in the living room. His mother called to him and said, "Johnny, come do the dishes." He said, "No, Mom, I can't, because right now I'm reading a novel and the villain has the hero down and he's about to kill him. So I can't come now. I have to see how the story turns out." But as most mothers do, she persisted. And after being persistent, he knew that he had to go, so he flipped to the last page of the book and read it. And that afternoon when he went into the kitchen, evidently he said, "You know, the villain is doing fine in chapter 6, but is he ever in for a shock when he gets to the last page?" Now, you know, any evaluation of the way in which the world is going needs to include the fact that the bad guys seem to be winning. This is not an optimistic day and age in which to be alive. Remember the days when we actually thought that maybe we could win the abortion war? Looks more doubtful now than ever. Are you aware of the fact that the militant homosexuals have won so many advances through intimidation that they have the news media not only totally on their side, but also they campaigned early in the AIDS phenomenon for the right to infect others with this disease? I'm not talking about your average homosexual who struggles with homosexuality. I'm talking about the militants. And there's a big distinction between them and others who may perhaps understand that they have this difficulty which they don't seem to be able to get over. But we're living in a day and age when there are expansive rights being given to homosexual groups. The far-reaching implications are chilling for society. We have a divorce rate. We have movies that are filled with violence and occult and moral impurity, and Christians oftentimes are watching these and filling their minds with all kinds of things that are totally contrary to what the Bible teaches, and yet justifying it on a number of different grounds, because the human mind has the ability to justify anything that the human heart really wants to do. Isn't it interesting that in the drug war, which some people think that we're beginning to win, the drug war, the more information that goes out, the more people we have on drugs, billions of dollars spent, and yet there's very little evidence that we're able to clean the place up because the human heart craves it. There is this high that people have. And you look at society and you see the breakup of the home and you see the frustration and the emotional and spiritual entanglements that people have as they grow up because they don't have a good set of roots at home. And you say to yourself, how much hurt can there be in this world anyway? It's clear that the villain has the hero down, if there are any heroes left, and about to kill him. And that's why today we want to look at the last page. We're going to find out how it all ends. Now, if you've been here, you know that this is the 7th in a series of messages entitled, What Is God Up To? And in some senses, the most important message comes next week. The title is Looking Back to Planet Earth, because we're going to pretend that we are looking at Earth from the vantage point of heaven and eternity, and finally answering the question of what in the world was God up to, and was all the evil and all the pain in the world worth it to pull off whatever he had in mind? So I hope that you're here next week to hear the final message in this series. But what is God doing today? What is it that He's doing today? He is calling out a people for His name. The purpose of the church in the world is to tell men and women that there is an eternity to which all of us are moving with great speed and necessity, and that we must prepare to meet our God. Now, there are many other things that flow out of that message, but that is the bottom line. How has Satan tried to thwart the purpose of God in the world? First of all, he's always tried to get the church diverted. First of all, it was through awesome persecutions. Sometime I'd like to preach a couple of messages on the early persecutions that went on in Rome and some of the other countries, because we don't know anything. We don't know anything about what suffering is. You know, it's one thing to die yourself. You can be a hero and you can say, sure, I'm willing to be eaten by the lions, and you can walk out there and they have you for breakfast. But what about your wife and children? What about your family? How do they react? How would they get along without fathers? And how do children get along without mothers? It's excruciating. During those early centuries, there was so much anguish. It's unbelievable. And yet you know that more people have probably died for the cause of Christ in the last century than even in the first century. It's just that we live in this bubble of protection called the United States of America. But there are other countries in the world where there is intense persecution, where there are massacres and death, and it's all around. Now, first of all, then, Satan tried persecution. It did not work too well. Even the pagans began to get nauseated at the amount of blood that was shed by Christians. So what he tried to do after that was politics. He tried to get the church wedded with the state. And when the church got wedded with the state, it lost its central focus almost immediately, because then the church became interested in such things as political strength and political power and money and corruption. And the gospel, instead of being the news by which people are born again or saved, became adherence to a set of laws or principles within the church and within society. And this, of course, was also combined with many pagan ideas. And so the light of the gospel almost was extinguished. Now you find also that today Satan uses many of the same tactics of diversion. There are people today who actually think the responsibility of Christianity is to Christianize America through laws. Well, I believe in fighting for just laws, but that isn't the principle.